Just look at her. She's done.
She spat on a gardener in front of her friends, laughing for the camera like it was all a joke, until she heard the sound. 80 Harley engines across the street, cutting their work, leather vests turning toward her in perfect silence, and the biggest one standing up slow, eyes locked, whispering just 2 words. She's done. Before we dive into this story, where are you watching this from right now? I want to see how far this message of brotherhood, justice, and redemption reaches. Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe respect is earned, not bought, and that real strength looks like accountability, hit that subscribe button. You're about to join a community that stands for loyalty, honor, and the code of the road. Now, let's get into the story. The Texas sun didn't apologize for burning that afternoon. It hung white-hot above the Hayden estate, like a judge waiting to pass sentence, casting sharp shadows across perfectly manicured lawns that had never known honest sweat. Alfreda Morales moved through the heat like a prayer in motion. At 56, her hands told stories her mouth never would, calloused palms, dirt under short nails, fingers that had crossed borders, raised a daughter alone, and turned barren soil into beauty for people who never learned her last name. She knelt by the rose bushes now, humming something low and familiar, a song from Guadalajara that tasted like childhood and smelled like her mother's kitchen. To Alfreda, every garden was sacred ground, not because of what grew there, but because of what it taught. Patience, faith, the stubborn dignity of things that bloomed despite the thorns. She didn't hear the engines at first. They were background noise, a low rumble that vibrated through the earth like a heartbeat. Across the street, behind chain link and scattered tools, 80 men and women in leather vests moved with purpose. The patch on their backs read Guardians of the Road in bold letters, stitched above the Hells Angels rocker. They were building something. A veteran's garden. Raised beds for men who'd lost pieces of themselves overseas and needed soil between their fingers to remember what it felt like to grow something instead of destroy it. Rick Bear Lawson knelt beside a wooden frame, wrench in hand, sweat darkening his grey beard. He didn't look up when the Harleys idled or when someone cursed at a stubborn bolt. He just worked. That was the code: talk less, do more, leave the place better than you found it. Then the music hit, bass so loud it rattled fences, a white convertible screaming up the Hayden driveway like it owned the oxygen itself. The engine cut, the music didn't. Bear's hand slowed on the wrench. Miles Hayden stepped out in white designer everything, sunglasses that cost more than most people's rent, blonde hair caught in that manufactured wind that only money can buy. Her phone was already up, already recording. 2 friends flanked her, laughing at something only the screen could see. "Oh my God, it's literally so hot," Miles whined into the camera, tilting her face like the sun was a prop in her story. A gust of wind kicked up. Dust swirled from the garden beds, carried across the driveway, and settled onto Miles's pristine outfit like truth landing on a lie. She froze. Her head snapped toward Alfreda, who looked up with the kind of soft concern only a woman who'd scrubbed floors for strangers could manage. "I'm sorry, señorita," Alfreda said gently, standing. "The wind it—" "Are you serious right now?" Miles cut her off, voice rising. She turned the phone toward Alfreda like a weapon. "You just got dirt all over my dress. I did not mean—" "Don't talk to me," Miles snapped, her friends cackling behind her. "Oh my God, can't they find people who actually speak English?" The laughter was sharp, cutting, designed to humiliate. Alfreda's smile faded, but she didn't move, didn't argue, just stood there in the dust and heat, small and silent, the way she'd learned to survive in a country that loved her labor, but not her name. Then Miles did something that stopped time. She spat, not near, not vaguely, deliberately, a wet, ugly sound that hit the dirt beside Alfreda's boots like a slap across the soul. Her friends erupted, The phone kept recording. Miles laughed, high and cruel, already imagining the likes. Across the street, the wrench hit the dirt. Bear rose slowly, 6'3" of scarred knuckles and road-worn patience, his eyes, pale and sharp beneath his bandana, locked onto the scene like a hawk spotting prey. "You see that?" he murmured, voice low as thunder before it breaks. Tex Rivera, his second in command, stood beside him, lean, tattooed, with a jaw that could crack walnuts and eyes that had seen too much to let this slide. "Yeah," Tex said quietly. "I see it." One by one, the angels stopped working, wrenches lowered, hammers stilled. 80 vests turned toward the Hayden estate like a single breathing thing. The air thickened. Miles didn't notice. She was too busy posing, too busy performing cruelty for an audience that would forget her name by breakfast. But the angels, they don't forget. Bear wiped his hands on his jeans, slow and deliberate. His voice was steady when he spoke, not loud, not angry, just certain. "She's about to learn what respect means." The sun kept burning, the cicadas kept screaming, and somewhere in the distance, a Harley engine idled like a storm gathering strength. Alfreda bent down, picked up her pruning shears, and went back to work. Because that's what you do when the world spits on you. You keep planting. The clubhouse smelled like old leather and motor oil, honest smells that didn't lie. Bear stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, watching his brothers and sisters argue under the glow of a single hanging bulb. 80 angels had seen what happened. 80 opinions now filled the room like smoke. "We roll up there tonight," Razor said, slamming his palm on the table. "Teach that little princess what happens when you disrespect working people." "And then what?" Bear's voice cut through the noise. "We make the news. Give her daddy a reason to call us thugs. That what you want?" Razor leaned back, jaw working. Tex stood near the window, arms folded. "The video's already out there, Bear. It's spreading. People are pissed." Bear nodded slowly. He'd seen it. The clip was everywhere, Miles laughing, Alfreda standing silent in the dust, the spit hitting dirt like a gavel. The comments were brutal, angry, righteous, but anger without direction was just noise. "We've got a code," Bear said, his voice low and steady. "We don't fight disrespect with fists. We fix it with lessons." The room went quiet. "So what's the play?" A woman named Juno asked from the back, her leather vest worn smooth from years on the road. Bear let the silence stretch. Then he smiled, not cruel, not soft, strategic. "We make her earn it back." By morning, the video had 4 million views. Gavin Hayden sat in his marble office, phone pressed to his ear, throwing money at the problem like he always did. Lawyers, PR firms, a donation to some charity with immigrant in the name. But the internet didn't care about his checkbook. The Hayden name, built on real estate empires and political connections, was trending for all the wrong reasons. His daughter's face was a meme, a punchline, a symbol of everything people hated about wealth without consequence. Gavin ended the call and stared out the window at the garden below. Alfreda was there, as always, tending roses like nothing had happened. He didn't know her last name. That realization hit harder than it should have. Across town, Bear sat on his Harley in the parking lot of a diner, scrolling through his phone. Tex pulled up beside him, engine rumbling. "Hayden's scrambling," Tex said. "Trying to bury it." Bear pocketed his phone. "Can't bury respect, brother. Either you have it or you don't. So we going over there?" Bear looked toward the horizon, where the Hayden estate sat behind its gates like a fortress that had never been tested. "Yeah," he said, "but not the way they expect." He kicked his bike to life. The engine roared, a sound older than money, louder than fear. Behind him, 79 more engines answered. Inside her bedroom, Miles scrolled through the comments, her stomach twisting. The video she thought would get laughs had turned into a wildfire. Her friends weren't answering. Sponsors were dropping her. The followers she'd spent years cultivating were calling her trash. She deleted the post. The internet didn't forget. Downstairs, her father's voice rose in anger. Something about handling it, something about damage control. Miles threw her phone across the room. Outside, in the distance, the low rumble of motorcycles echoed through the Texas night like thunder rolling in. She didn't know it yet, but the storm was already here. Dawn came slow and orange, the kind of light that makes shadows look like warnings. Gavin Hayden stood in his kitchen, espresso in hand, reading the latest statement his legal team had drafted. Words like regret and misunderstanding and taken out of context. The usual script. Then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong in his neighborhood. The deep, synchronized rumble of engines, dozens of them rolling closer like a freight train made of iron and fury. He walked to the window. His blood went cold. 80 motorcycles lined the street outside his gates, 80 leather vests gleaming in the morning sun. 80 men and women standing silent, arms crossed, faces unreadable. At the front stood a man built like a mountain-gray beard, faded bandana, eyes that had seen too much road to be intimidated by money. Bear. Gavin set down his cup and walked outside, forcing confidence he didn't feel. "Can I help you?" he called from the gate, voice steady but thin. Bear didn't move, didn't smile, just stared. "Your daughter disrespected one of ours," Bear said, his voice carrying across the driveway like a sermon. "We're here to collect." Gavin bristled. "I don't know what you think you're—" "We're not here for apologies," Tex interrupted, stepping forward. "And we're damn sure not here for your money." Gavin opened his mouth, closed it. Bear pulled a folded piece of paper from his vest and handed it through the gate. Gavin unfolded it slowly. It was an address, a veterans' rehabilitation garden, and a schedule. "Your girl works there," Bear said. "1 week. Under the woman she disrespected. She plants, she sweats, she learns what respect looks like from the ground up." Gavin's jaw tightened. "And if I refuse?" Bear's smile was colder than the steel on his bike. "Then the world keeps watching, keeps talking, keeps making sure the Hayden name means exactly what it looks like right now, spoiled, cruel, and empty." The silence stretched. Behind Gavin, a door opened. Miles stepped onto the porch, pale and hollow-eyed. She'd heard everything. "Dad," she whispered, "just do it." Gavin turned, stunned. She looked at the ground. "I can't take this anymore." Bear nodded once, satisfied. 1 week, he said. "Starting tomorrow, 6 a.m. He turned, mounted his bike, and the engines roared to life in unison, a sound that rattled windows and settled into bones. As they rode away, Gavin stood frozen at the gate, holding a piece of paper that weighed more than every contract he'd ever signed. Inside, Miles sat on the stairs, head in her hands. For the first time in her life, Daddy's money couldn't save her. End of Chapter 3. At Chapter 4, the first day of dirt. Miles showed up 10 minutes late, wearing $300 sneakers and an attitude that could cut glass. The veteran's garden stretched before her, rows of raised beds, wheelbarrows full of compost, shovels leaning against a shed that had seen better decades, sweat and soil, nothing glamorous, nothing filtered. Bear stood near the gate, arms folded, watching her approach like she was a test he already knew the answer to. "You're late," he said flatly. "Traffic," Miles muttered, pulling her sunglasses down. "Try again tomorrow without the excuses." She bit back a response. "Barely." Alfreda appeared from behind a row of tomato plants, gloves, dirty, face calm. She didn't look angry, didn't look satisfied, just present. "Buenos dias," Alfreda said softly. Miles didn't respond. Bear gestured to a wheelbarrow. "You're spreading compost today. 2 tons, those beds over there." He pointed to a section near the back fence. "Alfreda will show you how." Miles stared at the wheelbarrow like it had personally insulted her. "You're yoking." "Do I look like I tell jokes?" Bear said. She grabbed the handles and immediately stumbled. The wheelbarrow tipped, Compost spilled across her shoes. Someone nearby, a veteran with a prosthetic leg, chuckled low. Miles's face burned red. Elfrida knelt beside her, scooping the compost back into the wheelbarrow without a word. Her hands moved steady, patient, like she'd done this 1,000 times for people who never said thank you. You push from the center, Elfrida said gently. Balance, not force. Miles wanted to scream, wanted to call her father, wanted to run. But the cameras weren't here, the followers weren't watching. Just dirt, and a woman who somehow made humility look like strength. Try again, Elfrida said. Miles gripped the handles. Push. It rolled. 1 foot, then 2. By noon, her hands were blistered, her nails cracked, her back screamed. Elfrida offered her a bottle of water from a cooler that had seen more summers than Miles had lived. You did good today, Elfrida said. Miles wanted to cry, or laugh. She wasn't sure which. Across the garden, Bear leaned against a post, watching. Tex walked up beside him. Think she'll make it? Bear didn't answer right away, just watched Miles sitting in the dirt, drinking water beside a woman she'd spit on 3 days ago. You can't force change, brother, Bear said quietly, but sometimes you gotta break pride like clay before you can shape it into something worth keeping. The sun hung high. The work wasn't finished, and neither was she. Day 3 arrived with bruises Miles didn't know muscles could make. She showed up early this time, no sunglasses, no attitude, just exhaustion she couldn't Instagram away. Her hands were wrapped in bandages that didn't quite cover the blisters, and her designer sneakers had been replaced with something cheaper, more practical. Progress, Bear thought, watching from his bike. Elfrida was already in the rose section, pruning with the kind of care surgeons reserved for saving lives. Each cut deliberate, each stem respected. Today we work the roses, Elfrida said, handing Miles a pair of shears. Miles took them carefully, remembering the balance lesson from the wheelbarrow. She knelt beside Elfrida and reached for a branch. Wait, Elfrida said gently. Look first, see where it wants to grow, then guide it. Miles paused, studying the bush. It looked chaotic, thorns everywhere, branches crossing, some dead, some alive. How do you know which ones to cut? The dead ones take from the living, Elfrida said. You remove what no longer serves, make space for what can bloom. Miles nodded slowly and reached again. The thorn caught her palm before she saw it coming. Ah, she jerked back, blood welling bright red against her skin. Elfrida was beside her in a heartbeat, pulling a bottle of water from her bag. She poured it over the wound, gentle and sure, then wrapped it with a clean strip of cloth from her pocket. Roses have thorns, Elfrida murmured, tying the bandage. They remind us nothing lovely comes easy. Miles stared at the woman kneeling before her. This woman she'd mocked, this woman she'd spit on, this woman now wrapping her wound like she was worth saving. Something inside Miles cracked open. Not loud, not dramatic, just open. Why are you being nice to me? Miles whispered, voice breaking. Elfrida looked up, eyes soft but unflinching. Because everyone deserves a second chance to grow, she said, even the ones with thorns. Miles's throat tightened. Tears came before she could stop them, hot and ugly and real. Elfrida didn't look away, didn't judge, just sat with her in the dirt beneath the Texas sun, while a girl who'd never apologized for anything finally learned what sorry felt like. Across the garden, Bear turned to Tex. She's breaking, Tex said. Bear nodded. Good. That's where the light gets in. That night, Miles sat on her bedroom floor, staring at her bandaged hand. She thought about Elfrida's hands, scarred, calloused, strong. She thought about the roses, the thorns, the lesson hidden in the pain. Outside her window, the distant rumble of motorcycles rolled through the neighborhood like a hymn. And for the first time since the video, Miles didn't reach for her phone. She just sat and let herself feel the weight of what she'd done. Day 4, Miles arrived before Elfrida. No makeup, hair pulled back, the kind of tired that lives in your bones when you've finally stopped running from yourself. She sat on the edge of a raised bed, bandaged hand resting on her knee, watching the sunrise paint the garden gold. It was quiet here, honest, the kind of place that didn't ask you to perform. She liked that. Alfreda's truck rumbled into the lot, old and reliable. She stepped out with her usual grace, a woman who carried dignity like other people carried purses. "You're early," Alfreda said, smiling. "Couldn't sleep," Miles admitted. They worked side by side that morning, planting seedlings in silence, the kind of silence that didn't need filling, comfortable, earned. At lunch, Miles sat with Alfreda under the shade of an oak tree. The bikers gathered nearby, Bear, Tex, Juno, Razor, and a dozen others, eating sandwiches and trading stories about roads they'd ridden and brothers they'd lost. "You ever ride?" Juno asked Miles, nodding toward the bikes. Miles shook her head. "My dad says they're dangerous." Razor snorted. "Your dad drives a car. Those kill more people every year than bikes ever will." "It's not the machine," Bear said, voice low and steady. "It's the respect you give it. Bikes don't lie. Road doesn't forgive. You learn quick or you don't learn at all." Miles listened, really listened, in a way she hadn't listened to anyone in years. "Why do you do this?" she asked suddenly, gesturing to the garden. "The charity stuff, the community work." Bear leaned back, chewing slow. "Because the world sees the vest and thinks they know us," he said. "Thinks we're outlaws, criminals, trouble. And you're not." "Some of us were," Tex said, shrugging. "Some still are, depending on who you ask. But the road teaches you something, kid. Every man and woman here has dirt under their nails. That's how we know we've lived, how we know we've built something that matters." Juno added, "We take care of our own, and sometimes our own means people who got no one else." Miles looked at Alfreda, who sat quietly peeling an orange, listening with the patience of someone who'd heard 1,000 stories and still believed in people. "How long have you been in America?" Miles asked her softly. Alfreda glanced up. 20 years. I came with 2 suitcases and my daughter. She was 6. Where is she now?" "Nursing school, Houston." Alfreda's smile could have powered the sun. "She graduates next year. You must be proud." "Every day," Alfreda said. "She is my garden, the one I planted first." Miles felt something twist in her chest, not pain, but recognition. This woman had given everything, worked jobs that broke her back, sent money home, raised a daughter alone in a country that barely saw her. And Miles had spit on her. "I'm sorry," Miles whispered. Alfreda reached over and squeezed her hand gently. "I know, Mija. I know." For the first time in her life, Miles smiled not for a camera, not for followers, just because it felt right. Bear watched from across the garden, nodding once. "She's got a chance," he said to Tex. "Yeah," Tex replied, "long as she don't forget where she found it." It was supposed to be over. Miles had done the work, planted the seeds, learned the lesson. She'd even started to feel something close to peace. Then her phone exploded. A new video. Grainy footage shot from a distance, Miles in the garden, dirt on her knees, laughing with Alfreda and the bikers. The caption read, "Look who's playing poor now. Guess daddy's money can buy redemption too. Number fake, number privilege in disguise." It was Emma, one of her so-called best friends, the girl who'd been in the car that day, the one who'd laughed the loudest. Now she was cashing in. The comments flooded in vicious, cynical, unforgiving. "She's just doing it for PR. Rich girl plays dress-up with the help. Disgusting. Once trash, always trash." Miles sat on her bed, phone shaking in her hands, watching the video loop, watching her own fragile progress get shredded by people who didn't know her, didn't care to, and never would. Her father knocked once and entered. "I can handle this," Gavin said, already pulling out his phone. "We'll sue for defamation. We'll—" "No." He stopped. Miles stood, face pale but set. "I said no. Miles, this is damaging our—" "Our what, Dad?" Her voice cracked. "Our reputation, the one I destroyed, the one you tried to buy back?" Gavin flinched. She grabbed her keys. "Where are you going?" "To fix it," she said, "the right way." 20 minutes later, Miles stood in front of the veterans' garden, phone in hand, the morning light harsh and unforgiving. Bear and Tex watched from the shed. Alfreda approached slowly. "Mija, what's wrong?" Miles opened her phone, showed her the video. Alfreda's face didn't change. Just key. Sad. "I need to say something," Miles said, voice shaking. "And I need you to hear it first." She opened her camera. Hit record. "My name is Miles Hayden," she began, voice steady despite the tears. "A week ago, I did something unforgivable. I mocked a woman who's worked harder in one day than I have in my entire life. I spit on her. I laughed. I thought I was untouchable." She looked at Alfreda, standing just off camera. "But I was wrong. This woman, Alfreda Morales, has taught me more about strength, dignity, and grace than anyone in my life. She didn't owe me forgiveness, she didn't owe me patience, but she gave it anyway." Miles' voice broke. "People are saying this is fake, that I'm just doing damage control, and maybe a week ago that would have been true, but not anymore. I'm here because I want to be. Because these people, these bikers, these veterans, this woman, they showed me what respect actually looks like." She wiped her eyes. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know some of us can change, if someone believes in us enough to let us try." She ended the recording. Alfreda stepped forward and pulled her into a hug. "You're brave, Mija," she whispered. Behind them, Bear nodded to Tex. "Post it," Bear said. Within an hour, the video had 1 million views. And this time, the comments were different. The community center smelled like old wood and fresh coffee. Folding chairs lined the room in neat rows, filled with faces Miles didn't recognize: veterans, bikers, locals, reporters with cameras perched on shoulders like vultures waiting for blood. She stood backstage, hands shaking, staring at the curtain that separated her from judgment. Alfreda stood beside her, calm as Sunday morning. "You don't have to do this," Alfreda said softly. "Yes, I do," Miles replied. Bear appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. 5 minutes, you ready?" Miles nodded, though her stomach said otherwise. He stepped closer, voice low. "Listen to me. That crowd out there, half of them want to see you fall. The other half just want the truth. Give 'em that, and you walk out of here whole. And if I mess up," Bear's smile was small, genuine, "then you mess up honest. That's more than most people ever do." He left. Alfreda squeezed Miles's hand. "I'll be right there with you." The lights dimmed. The murmur of the crowd settled. Bear walked on stage, his presence commanding silence without effort. "We're not here for theater," Bear said into the mic, his voice filling the room. "We're here because respect matters, because accountability matters, and because sometimes the hardest thing a person can do is admit they were wrong." He gestured toward the wings. Miles Hayden, Alfreda Morales. They walked out together. The cameras flashed like lightning. The crowd murmured, some hostile, some curious. Miles stepped to the mic. Her voice wavered at first, then found footing. "I spat on someone better than me," she began, the words raw and unpolished. "I thought money made me worth more. I thought cruelty was funny. I thought I was untouchable." She glanced at Alfreda, who nodded gently. "But I was wrong. I was raised to believe my name meant something, that wealth equaled value, that people like Alfreda were less." Her voice broke. She didn't hide it. "I've spent the last week working beside her, learning from her, and I've realized she's richer than I'll ever be, not in dollars, in character, in grace, in the kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself." The room was silent. "I can't undo what I did, but I can promise I'll never be that person again." She stepped back. Alfreda stepped forward, and the crowd leaned in. "I forgive her," Alfreda said simply, her accent thick but her words clear. Not because she earned it, but because holding hate is too heavy, and I've carried enough weight in my life. The room erupted. Naught in boos, in applause. Thunder that shook the walls. Bear stood in the back, arms crossed, nodding once. Outside, 80 motorcycles roared to life in unison, a salute that rattled windows and echoed through the Texas night like the voice of something ancient and unbreakable. Miles stood on that stage, tears streaming, and for the first time in her life, she felt free. 3 weeks later, Alfreda stood in front of a piece of land she never thought she'd own. A small plot by the river, wild and untouched, where the earth still remembered what it meant to grow without permission. The envelope had arrived that morning, no return address, just a deed with her name on it and a handwritten letter folded inside. For Morales Gardens, a place to teach others what you taught me. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Miles. Alfreda had wept, not from shock, from the quiet, overwhelming beauty of second chances. Now she stood there, shovel in hand, staring at the soil that would become something new, something hers. Behind her, a mural stretched across the property's back wall, freshly painted by the angels. Bold letters in red and black. Respect rides forever. Beneath it, a scene. Alfreda's hands planting roses, motorcycles in the distance, the sun breaking over a Texas horizon. She touched the wall gently, fingers tracing the paint. "It's beautiful," a voice said. Miles stood at the edge of the property, hands in her pockets, hair pulled back, no makeup, just her. "You came," Alfreda said, smiling. "Wouldn't miss it." They worked together that afternoon, planting the first tree, a live oak, strong and stubborn, the kind that would outlive them both. As the sun dipped low, the distant rumble of engines rolled across the hills. Alfreda looked up. 80 motorcycles appeared on the horizon, riding in formation, slow, deliberate, reverent. At the front, Bear and Tex, vests gleaming in the golden light. They didn't stop, didn't speak, just rode past, raising their hands in salute one by one. A brotherhood honoring a woman who'd taught them something they already knew but had forgotten. Respect isn't given, it's grown. As the last bike disappeared into the distance, Bear's voice carried on the wind, low and certain. "That's what respect looks like." Alfreda stood in the dirt, shovel in hand, soil on her gloves, sunlight on her face. Miles stood beside her, no longer the girl who'd spit on a gardener, just someone learning to plant. The oak tree swayed gently in the breeze. And somewhere, on a long stretch of American highway, 80 engines sang a hymn older than money, louder than hate, and stronger than any wall ever built. The kind of sound that reminds you, some things can't be bought, some things can't be broken, some things ride forever. If you believe respect is earned through humility, not bought with money, like and share this story. Subscribe now for more stories of brotherhood, justice, and the code of the road. Also, check out the 2 videos showing on the screen right now, specially crafted for you.